You're listening to Wild Things and Wild Places, a Muley Fanatic Foundation podcast that aims to discuss issues and efforts related to the Muley Fanatic Foundation mission, the conservation of mule deer, furthering the sport of hunting, and sound wildlife management.
Everybody knows I'm a Muley Fanatic.
It's time for Wild Things and Wild Places. And here's your guide, Joshua Corsi.
And welcome to another episode of Wild Things and Wild Places. Today we are talking hunting, and we are talking about sometimes those unfortunate mishaps that occur when hunting, but all the more important reasons why preparedness is such a key element of hunting. In fact, in just a few days, folks will already be taken to the field, and this can be actually some of the scariest weather that Wyoming can present. You have great sunny weather, you pack for it, and weather can change on a dime in Wyoming. But we're going to talk about a different situation, the unfortunate situation that I hope nobody runs into, but inevitably somebody does every year. And joining me today, I've got Bryant Birch from Green River, Wyoming, and I've got Todd Redmond from Lyman, Wyoming. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you both here. You guys, good hunting buddies, have been hunting for years. September 20th will be a year anniversary of one of those occurrences that we're talking about that nobody ever wants to have. Bryant, you've actually had a couple of mishaps hunting.
Yeah, you think Todd would stop hunting with me after all the issues I have.
Are you the jinx?
I am the jinx. I think. I keep telling him.
That makes sense,
actually.
It's all starting to come together.
Yeah, we've hunted for quite a few years and had some great experiences. Unfortunately, you have a few of those you don't want to go back and have again, but we sure enjoy getting together, and I think we make a great pair.
Yeah. It's always nice when you can share those experiences in the field with a buddy or a friend or family, when you can put those years together year after year and have those same experiences. There's no greater experience than those that are made in the field, in my mind.
Yeah, I'd agree. I wouldn't trust anyone else. Todd, he's got my back, I got his back, and we know when we walk up in there, we know we're going to come out together, and it's how it's going to be.
Yeah, what I was alluding to was September 20th being the anniversary date. You had an unfortunate accident occur, but let's talk about the setting, because it's not like you were close to a road. It's not like you had emergency services nearby. This was an elk hunt in 2023, September 20th. And Todd, that's a day that will forever be in your mental Rolodex.
Oh, absolutely. It was quite an experience. Yeah, we were in a very remote area up in northwest Wyoming, in this area called the Thoroughfare, which is outside of Grand Teton National Park, outside Yellowstone. It's one of the most remote areas in the lower 48, especially in Wyoming. It's the closest road that we knew of was 30 miles away. That's how far in we'd got in for this elk hunt. And we'd taken several horses. I think at one point we had almost 14 horses with 7 people that we were with in total. But it was very remote and rugged. In Wyoming, like you mentioned, you never know what can happen. Things can change on a dime, especially in that country with weather conditions and just how remote it is. You've got to be prepared. You've got to be ready for the worst.
And you know that going into it. But then you add the element of horses. And Bryant, you still have the beauty scar kicked right in the head.
Yeah, you think I'd learned my lesson. My mom says, didn't you receive enough brain damage from that kick? Yeah, it was an unfortunate event that day. Scouting for elk and was kicked in the head, and luckily came out of that alive. But I still, I love horses. I love being around them. I love being on them. It just changes the game when you're hunting with horses. A lot of people go to goats and llamas and whatnot, but we just, I don't know, the element of horses, we just love. They get us where we need to go, bring the meat out, take the camp in. But yeah, we had I think we planned 14 some horses, whatever it was, and in fact, we lost a couple guys that were on our group. They got there right when we got set up. They had to go home. I think it was one of them lost a loved one and had to turn around and get on the horse and go 30 miles back out. So thank heavens for the horses to get you into those places and to get you out.
Yeah, let's talk about it, Todd. Tell me what led up to the actual event that occurred that ultimately resulted in a Blackhawk from Cheyenne flying, refueling in Riverton, and then ultimately making its way to northwest Wyoming and evacuating you off the mountain.
I guess we could start with that morning. We were hunting elk. We'd bow hunted for about a day and a half, had decided to go up higher on the mountain. So we were in this area. It's about 11,000 feet. And we had found a few bulls the night before. Some of our friends actually had spotted them and advised to go up with them. And we split up from that group. There was 3 brothers, the Rollins brothers, Kobe, Marty, and Drew. They'd helped us get up on that mountain. Brian and I had split off of them, and they went west to hunt after one bull, and we went to the east. And it was a long, deep, dark canyon that morning. We got up at 3:30 in the morning, rode up the mountain. We pursued a group of elk. We could hear them bugling in the dark. We're in an area that we'd only been into a few days before. It was still really new to us, and it was an adventure for sure, but we had chased this bull a little bit, but they were on to us. They could hear our horses in the dark. It was just the most quiet, beautiful morning you've ever experienced in this high country. And these elk moved off pretty fast. We got a quick look at that bull. The cow, lead cow, just gone. They took off over the top of the mountain. So Brian and I had found ourselves in an area that we weren't that familiar with in the dark and trying to figure out where to go. Well, we looked at our maps, found an area that we wanted to go scout, and we thought, let's just make the most of it. Things didn't go as planned as we'd hoped. But we got up on that mountain, right as the sun was coming up, we just lucked into this whole big group of elk that were feeding on the backside of that cliff. And how many elk would you say were there? We heard at least 7 bulls bugling below us. It was phenomenal.
70 to 100 head of elk, just in this
Just scattered.
beautiful
Just picturesque.
bowl with a cliff surrounding it. We couldn't figure out a way in, but we were on top looking down into it. I picture it as being at Estes Park. You ever been there? And you walk in and there's elk everywhere, and they're bugling everywhere, and they're running everywhere. And another thing I think that we need to say is there had been a grizzly bear pretty much in that same spot we parked our horses, we were on. So we knew there was a boar in there somewhere, and he was big. And so that heightened the excitement, the fear, the scare.
Make you a little more alert.
Oh, when you're in the dark and you're coming up we camped way in the bottom, and we had to come up the same trail he'd been on. And
12
up
hours
the
earlier, we
switchbacks,
saw that bear.
Oh, yeah.
So we know we had company up there somewhere. I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want to leave the horses. I was
At that point, were the horses at all skittish?
They were great.
Just doing their thing.
Absolutely wonderful. They did a great job.
And we watched them to make sure the ears didn't perk up or anything. Behind our senses, we for sure were watchful. But yeah, that was just to add to the element a little bit. When you're on this cliff and you're looking down these elk, and I'll let him continue. But it was phenomenal. And when that sun comes up, I've never been a part of something so beautiful before. When you come over, you just don't, you didn't know those elk were there till you are on the cliff, and then you hear bugles and you look over and there's elk everywhere.
Yeah, it's like you hit this sound zone, like you're on the one side of the mountain, you can't hear anything. And you just cross 50 yards, and all of a sudden, boom, you can hear everything. All that sound's coming up the mountain, and you can see them, you can hear them. And they're just in different groups. They're all in the same little bowl. That we're watching.
These are elk dreams, right? Think about.
Yeah.
This is what you hope someday you can bring to fruition.
When you go to Estes Park, you're like, man, I wish I could hunt these elk, and because they're in different groups, they're bugling together, they're all in their running their own herds, and it was just like that. It was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. It's breathtaking.
So what time of morning was this?
7.
It was really early. So we were up on top of that mountain watching down off this cliff, and we're just seeing elk all over. So we're trying to make sure we're not want to be seen or heard anything. We're just laying low off the cliff. We tied our horses up about a mile back and hiked around this mountain. And we look down and see a couple elk. We start glassing. We're looking for a big bull. We're all for trophy elk at this point. I mean, when you're 30 miles in, you want to shoot
go big
something,
or go home.
Go big or go home situation. And so that's been our ongoing joke all trips. Don't shoot a dink. Don't shoot a dink. And we saw a 330 bull a couple days before that we passed up. That for me, that was the hardest.
How many
thing to do.
yards? It was like
at one point, he came 6 yards away from
archery,
me. And to hold back on that, it's like, oh my gosh, this takes way more willpower than I'm usually capable of.
Yeah.
No.
Especially when the friend said, "Oh, there's bigger ones than this." And we're like,
"Yeah, that's a pretty good
come
bull."
On. So eventually, we saw this bull come out across the basin. He'd come out. We got a quick look at him. We got the spotting scope on it, and it's absolutely like, that's a big bull. We've got to get him. And it was just, we're looking straight to the east. And we're trying to find him in our scopes. The sun's starting to come up, the light's washing out our scopes, so you could barely see this elk. And we want to make sure we get this bull down. And so we get on him. He's in and out of the trees, chasing cows. He's bugling back and forth other bulls. He's pushing other bulls away. And he finally comes out and bugles and just turns broadside. That's our chance. And so we got on him, and he was about 600 yards away. Yeah. We made a shot. He just dropped and rolled and just disappeared. We didn't see where he went. Then as soon as we shoot, the mountain explodes. Elk are just running. Everywhere. You hear sounds. You hear rocks running. It was crazy. And it was chaotic for maybe 45 seconds, and everything just went quiet. The elk stopped. They didn't run off too far. They were startled from the shots. They all just stopped. And so what was crazy is we had a group of cows right below us off this cliff that we didn't really pay much attention to. We didn't see any bulls with them. There was maybe a dozen or so with that group. But after I shot, we're looking, trying to find the bull, and we can't see him. We look back down off the cliff, and there's 15 more elk with those cows. And so I stand up and look over the edge. I was like, oh, Brian, there's another bull. There's another 6 point right below us.
And he was big. He was nice. I saw that bull drop and roll. I think at the time you mentioned, I don't know if I got him. He disappeared. And I'm like, no, you got it. He dropped.
You got it.
He's down there. He's rolling. But it was just crazy how usually when you kill an elk, everybody runs, and that's the end of the day. End of seeing an elk.
Yeah, the whole herd's gone.
And they just milled around and nothing happened and back to feeding again. And then this bull, like you said, was pushing these elk 15, 20 head of cows and right below us, 200 yards.
We just couldn't see them because we were just tucked
And they
back
couldn't
off the
see
cliff
us.
and they were just right below us down there.
So we're way right above him and he's pushing there. He's a nice 6 point.
So we're going to talk a little bit about gear because that's certainly a key element to this entire trip. But Todd, let's talk about the 600-yard shot. What were you shooting? You're shooting downhill.
Yeah, I'm shooting downhill. It's almost about a 45-degree angle or so shooting down. I'm shooting 300 Remington Ultra Mag, and that's my favorite round. It's a 180 grain bullet. We'd ranged him, and we took our time. I usually use these shooting sticks. I'm drawing a blank. I have a friend that designs these. And
told me to buy it.
Perfect opportunity. It clips on any trekking poles, and you clip them together, turn them sideways. So it's a lightweight system that you just have with. You don't have to have another set of shooting sticks. We always take our trekking poles with us. You just never know what's going to happen. If you're carrying out a lot of weight on your back with meat, you just have that ready. So that's what I shot off of, shooting down, and it was awesome. We'll send you a name of that. We got to get that.
Yeah, you got to get that in there.
Binoculars, the rangefinder on it, and that allowed us to see the range. I think it was 575, 580.
600 sounds better.
650. Yeah, it was a long shot.
It was a poke.
But it was a beautiful shot. He made a great shot, dropped that, hit it hard, and he didn't go anywhere. He dropped.
Yeah.
No, Brian made a phenomenal shot on that other bull that we mentioned. As he came out, he finally got a shot about 450 yards,
450.
and he shot that other 6 point and dropped him right there. We had two bulls down. That
200 yards from each other?
They died 200 yards apart within 2 minutes of each other. That's how fast things happened that morning.
300 class bulls, and I shoot a 300 Win Mag Remington and 180 grain bullet, and same thing. It ended the job. It did its job. And so we're on this cliff going. We have 300 class bulls. His was huge. We didn't know at the time.
We knew he was great, but
we knew they were both
didn't,
good.
We didn't make that quick decision. He was in and out of the trees, and I don't even care about score. If it gets me excited, that's what I go for.
And they're both. We think his is dead. We can't see it. We know mine is out in the open, which I was happy to have because bear country. And now we're in a dilemma. We don't know how to get off this cliff.
You got to have a game
We
plan
don't have
to
a
get down
horses.
to
Yeah, we don't. We're looking around like there. And this cliff surrounds this whole bowl, and it's beautiful. It drops into two waterfalls into this. I've never seen anything like it. You just picture in your mind.
Yeah, it sounds
And
pristine.
to see it, and had any of those elk gone off the backside, I don't know if we would have ever got them out.
Yeah.
No, there's a big cliff that we're standing on top of. About 500 yards below us, there's another set of cliffs that's even bigger. And so we've got to find a way to get around the mountain we're on, get below the cliffs we're at, but stay above the other rim. And so we found a trail around there, but it took us, we had to hike back to our horses, get the horses, drop off the mountain, and then go all the way around the end of the mountain to the north, and then cut back in that bowl. We had to cross, I think, 4 different chutes. And there wasn't a good trail.
There's like 100-foot drop-offs on some of those chutes. So it was the pucker factor. You don't get on your horse to walk. You walk the horse across these. And it was a little nerve-wracking.
It was a total shot in the dark. We were just studying maps and go, oh, this looks like elevation is where we need to go. And we can follow that around. We'll take our chances.
And at this point, you're just lead roping the horses, walking.
Yeah.
We
just
rode them
leaving
to those chutes, and then we'd get off to walk them.
These chutes are steep. If you slipped on those, you're going to slide about 100 feet, maybe 200 feet, and then hit that cliff and drop 400 feet. It's rugged.
Yeah, rugged country.
But we made it into that bowl, and we went and found both of our elk. Our friends that split up from us that morning, maybe 5 minutes after you shot yours, they found that bull that they're pursuing, and they shot it. So we had 3 bulls down opening
in the
morning,
drainage.
just the other side. They were maybe 3 or 4 miles away from us. Everything was just going exceptionally well. It was incredible. We were in touch with them on our radios, and they were so far away that luckily one of them stayed about halfway. So we could communicate with him on the radio. He could communicate with his other brothers. And so we were in touch with each other, letting each other know what was going on.
So I think actually we communicated with them through the Garmin.
Okay.
One particular point here that's very important to make is I always carry the Garmin InReach Mini and connect it, Bluetooth it to my phone. And before we left, our buddies, Colby had one also, and we made sure we connected those so we would be in contact through that Garmin. I think there were 3 Garmin, 3 of them, so we made sure all 3 were talking. And I think that's a vital point to this is that when you split up with your group, that you have particular items that will connect. Because radios, we were so far away, I don't think our radios, maybe on the cliff they might have worked because we had line of sight.
Right.
'cause
Yeah.
we're at the very top. But once you're down in that bowl, it was
Oh, we lost communication as
no
soon as we dropped off
communication.
that mountain.
Yeah.
When we were on top, and we could talk to them on the radios.
they
Like
were
there's
just
little two-way, like Midland radios.
Yeah, but they were
line of sight. But
Yeah, and
these
I've even
Garmin-
seen with the GMRS, which is at 5 watts compared to the 1.5 watts of the FRS, it's still so much based on
Yeah,
line of sight.
it is.
And you get into that kind of country with that type of topography, and it doesn't take long before it's crickets.
We could, with binoculars, we could see where they were. They were telling us on the radio, hey, there's a snow patch here, and that's where we're at. And so we figured that's where they were. They were 3 to 5 miles
they were
away.
far.
But once we dropped in that bowl,
Nothing.
so the Garmin's came into play.
So they knew at this point that you guys had 2 elk down. You're in retrieval mode, and you're making your way. Everything's going good
Yeah.
until it's not.
9 in the morning. I think it was 9.
Yeah, by the time we got
9:30.
down there, it was about 9:30. It took a couple hours to get off that mountain all the way around into the bowl where those 2 elk were at.
And we're nervous because when the elk die, they start to emulate that smell.
In that area, when you hear a gunshot, when a grizzly hears a gunshot, they're coming. They've learned that they're safe. It's a dinner bell. I never really believed that until you're up there. Like, wait, there was a grizzly right here in this area. We've got 2 bulls down. We've shot a couple times.
Been a couple
hours. There's a good chance that a grizzly is going to be in this area, maybe on one of our elk. And so we're watching. We're being very cautious, but that's just in the back of your mind the whole time.
Has to be.
And so, yeah, I mean, we're packing pepper spray and pistols on our hips, but even then, you're still very nervous. So we'd gone into the bowl. We found Bryant's bowl. Everything was great. We went down to make sure we found mine because he had actually slid down and lodged it up against some trees right above a cliff that we couldn't even see from up on top. So we found both of them. We went back to Bryant's bowl and we just quarter everything out. You just got to keep that weight as low as possible. We bone everything out completely. And so we finished Bryant's bowl in maybe an hour, and we set the horses up close to us because we were at the top of that bowl where there's a bunch of scrub pines and it's not very tall, but there's some open areas around you. And so we were trying to use the horses' senses to our advantage. We kept them close enough where they could see us the whole time, where we could see them when we thought, if a bear's going to be in the area, the horses are going to sense them long before we ever will. They'll see them, hear them, smell them. We'll be able to read their body language and just know. And so we had them right by us the whole time, and they did fine. The elk smell, the blood didn't bother them at all, not even a little bit.
On my horse. Didn't care.
So we took care of that first one. Then we dropped down off the mountain and got to mine. And it was maybe 1 o'clock at that point.
One thing I think that matters is when you clean an elk, we took that meat 100 feet, maybe 200 feet lower than the gut pile. We wanted to get it away from the gut pile, just in case. We were thinking of everything about bears. If something comes in, we don't want our meat near this elk.
And we set in an area where we could see it from all the way around that bowl.
When we got to yours, it's now more in the trees.
Yeah, so it was a different story. So there was more of a forested area where mine had died. It was just right on the edge. So it didn't have the advantage of being more out in the open to just be aware of what's around you. And so we again kept the horses fairly close to us, maybe within 50 yards this time. But we set them out into the bowl side so they could see that hillside behind us, because that was where we felt really vulnerable. Like we're in this thick trees, and if there was something coming to us, we wouldn't know it until they're on us. And so we'd gone through this bowl. We got about halfway through, boning it out, and I went back to get my game bags. I left in my saddle bags. Like, oh, I got to grab those. Let's go throw this meat in. And we had a big pile of meat on it.
So tart.
So I went back to the horse, and as soon as I started walking up to him, I could tell something was wrong. His ears were up. His eyes were wide. He was snorting a little bit. He was picking up something. And my first thought was like, oh, he's probably just a little wore out from the day. Maybe that smell that elk's getting to him. That was what was going through my mind. But I walked up to him, and I was approaching his front right shoulder, and he was freaking out for a little bit. But I just started talking to him, calming him down, letting him smell my hands. I had a little blood on my hand. I wiped a little blood on his nose. He took a deep breath, and you just feel he just relaxed. And he was fine. And that horse had done great that whole trip.
And he's a
He
rental
done really
horse.
great horses.
And the people we rented from said, yeah, this guy's taking elk out. He's fine. He does great.
And he had done great. He really had done great that trip. And so I just spent maybe 30, 40 seconds just talking to him real gently, calming him down. And you could just feel like he really calmed down. And so I just took maybe one step toward the middle part of the saddle. And I just reached up and just touched my saddlebags. And that horse just blew up. He spun and kicked so fast. I've never seen a horse quite move that quick. And so he was just slightly above me on the hill. And when he turned and kicked with his right rear leg, he just grilled me right above my knee. And I'm not a little guy. I weigh 230 pounds. But I came off the ground and I flew a couple feet. And then I rolled a few more feet after that. And when he hit me, I just heard a snap.
I turned and thought a stick broke. And he was laying on the ground good 10 feet from the horse. And I'm still in the middle of trying to clean. We have half an elk still to clean. Now, I own the one horse, and we had a rental of his, and my horse was just looking around like nothing happened. And I had no idea what just happened other than I heard a snap. And he just said he just got kicked. And it took me back to when I got kicked. Just the whole memory of that situation. And I'm like, oh boy, we're in trouble.
Bryant came up right away. I felt like you were there. I don't know how you got there that fast.
I ran you.
You ran up there. And for me, I was going into shock right away. I didn't know if I just snapped my femur. That's what it felt like. And that's what's going through my mind, that my leg was just snapped right there. And so everything that you can imagine, just that worst case scenario, it all just happened. Like we're in a rugged area,
Instantly.
30 miles away, in the worst place possible for something like that to happen. And it's going through my mind. I'm thinking, I just broke my leg. We are screwed. Yeah, we have two
He's
dead
injured,
elk, 2 horses.
one good horse, the other one, and he lost his mind. This horse, I've never seen a horse lose
He just flipped
lose
his
mind.
switch. Yeah.
Looney.
He tried kicking
Again?
several people that day.
And he tried to kick. I mean,
He tried to kick you
he
later.
wouldn't let me get close to him. It was like every time you got close, he turned ready to whack you. And I'm like, great. Now we have one good horse. He's injured. I'm the only healthy one, and we have 2 dead elk. And who knows where this grizzly bear is?
And the other hunting party is
They're
4 or
miles
5
away.
miles away.
With only contact with a Garmin.
Yeah. So immediately, Todd, your situational awareness, you realize the predicament, the situation just elevated to the most extreme situation.
Yep.
You're on the ground.
I'm on the ground. I'm seeing stars. I don't know if it was just from the shock or if I hit my head when I fell down as well, but I'm just in a world of pain. I've broken bones. I've broken my nose twice. I've broken my wrist. I've broken my tibia. I've never felt pain like this. It's radiating up my body through my stomach, and I'm hyperventilating, and I'm in a lot of pain just dealing with that shock right away. And so, yeah, just for everything to be so perfect and just change on a dime to where now you're in potential life and death situation, that's what we just are experiencing. And so you're feeling all that fear, all that anxiety, all the worry about everything getting off. And at the same time, in my mind, like, we're not going to leave these elk. This ownership, it's like, you're not going to just walk away from something like that.
Right.
You got to get that meat out.
But you're not
owe it.
walking.
Yeah, I was in pretty rough shape. I had Bryant look it over, and I was like, Bryant, I've got to have you see if this leg's broke. It felt like it was. I felt
And it was directly above the knee.
just right above the knee, about 6 inches. So, I mean, about mid-thigh is where he hit me.
Yeah, so immediately you're thinking
Broken
femur,
femur.
femoral artery.
Yep, exactly.
Well, and
Your
I-
mind's racing.
Oh, and I go into now doctor mode. I'm a dentist, of course, but I got to check him out. I got to make sure he's not bleeding
Yeah.
externally. Is there a severed anything? Is he bleeding? And when we check, there's no bleeding. It's all internal. So now you don't know if he's bleeding internally. So there's a lot of things going through my mind. Like I take a suture kit. I take anesthetic.
This guy's the most prepared guy you'll ever hunt with.
I'm very prepared. I checked him out, and he could barely stand. And I think he made the decision, hey, we need to finish this elk. Like, Todd,
But you
can't even
at
move.
this point, you've maintained consciousness the whole time.
Up to this point,
He was struggling. You could tell. And I kept thinking, he's pretty tough. I've seen him in some pretty tough situations, but he's very tough. And I'm just seeing his eyes. I knew it was not good.
It rattled his
It
cage.
was not good. I knew he was in pain. And to go back a little bit, one thing that Todd and I think it's just having just this close friendship. One thing we always do every morning before we leave, we say a prayer. We pray that we'll be safe and that we'll enjoy the time and take care of that everything will be taken care of. And I know that was a huge help to this whole situation. A lot of people are spiritual in whatever ways they are. I think that was one thing that we always just fall back on is we believe that was one of the big miracles that got us through this. So we had no idea where we were other than the maps we had. And that was a moment I was grateful we did that. And we went into now survival mode. What are we going to do? And I had to make some decisions because you were pretty much,
I was the level-headed one still.
I don't know about that. He was hurting. He was bad. And he was, the good thing about Todd is he's always thinking, man, we got to do this. And I'm like, Todd, you stay put. I'm going to finish this elk. And he crawled over there and helped me finish the elk in massive pain. And I couldn't believe it. So we have nowhere to put this meat. We can't get to the game bags. We just have this little tarp. We have nowhere to put this extra elk. We have another elk that's cleaned up, but it's so.
And we'd planned on packing some of this meat out. We have 2 bulls down with 2 horses and 1 set of panniers, meat panniers. So we were going to load up the bigger horse as much as it could carry, and then we were going to carry the rest of the meat out. And we were going to try and just get everything off of that mountain at the same time. So we were really anticipating a very difficult climb out of there. But now that's all changed. I can't even hardly carry myself, let alone my backpack and a pack full of meat.
And we have one good horse that really, she's a smaller horse, so she's only going to take half an elk. And so I'm thinking, we got to hang this meat. We got to do something. I didn't care about the meat, essentially. I was really more worried about Todd. I knew we had to do it, and he was demanding, we got to take care of my elk. We got to get my elk out. Maybe it was because how big of an elk it was. Let's be real. It was a 350 bull. It was an 8x6. It was huge. And I don't think he wanted to leave it up there. So he was pretty stubborn about it.
Yeah, as to be expected, I would think.
That was a good bull.
And the weather was cooperating.
No, it was starting to change. As that horse kicked me, there was a storm that came right over that peak. We were just, 500 feet below that peak line. and a storm did come right over the top. And there were some scattered showers that were forecasted, and it just started spitting out some rain. If we had got a bunch of rain up there, all those chutes would have just turned to slime. And we'd have been trapped in that bowl. We really would have. We couldn't have walked out with horses. You can imagine how slick it gets. You've been in that high country all the time, and you know how scary it gets. And so that was going through my mind. It's like, we need to act. We need to get fast, get off this mountain fast. And we talked about calling for help. I'm very stubborn. I don't need help. I got a lot of pride.
Yeah.
I think a lot of hunters do that. We can take care of ourselves. We don't need to have any backup plan. I'm tough. I can do whatever it takes to get off this mountain. Sometimes you have that choice taken away from you, and that's why you've got to be ready and be with good people, have resources that you can call for aid if you need it.
And so at some point, you reach a decision that you're not coming off the mountain.
I told him, I said, so I got the Garmin InReach, and I reached out to our friends and said, we have a major predicament. We need help right now, ASAP.
Right.
Let's go. And they said, we cannot come. We have a dead elk we're trying to find. And I'm thinking, leave the elk. I'm texting them. Anyone that has a Garmin InReach, it doesn't just send. You got to wait a little bit.
There's a
delay. And we would wait for the response. They said, listen, once we get our elk found, taken care of, we will come. They had 3 horses.
They knew where you were at.
Yeah. And they were like, what bowl are you in? We dropped in, but they had the location off the device. I said, just follow the location, but get here as soon as you can. This was 10, 11 o'clock, I would say.
It was probably a little later than that, I would say, a little
12
afternoon.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, afternoon. Well, I guess we'd taken care of some elk, so maybe 1 o'clock.
Yeah, it was 1 or 2 o'clock, and we communicated with them, and they knew, they could sense like there's some urgency, and so they took care of their bull really fast, and they got it to the end of the canyon, dropped the meat off. They actually hung it in a bear pole at the end of the canyon, and they rode around to us, like right exactly when we needed them. Like when we finished that bull, they actually showed up, and we were able to direct them around those chutes and how to get down to us. And that was probably like at 3 o'clock, 3 in the afternoon when they finally got to us. And they didn't really know how serious it was. I think they knew there was something going on, but they didn't know how badly I was injured. They were just there to help. They're great guys.
And I'll tell you, when you are in a predicament that you're pretty much the only healthy person, you got 2 dead elk, friend that's your best friend that's not walking out. At least at the time, I didn't think he would, and there's no way he's getting out. And when you see them come over, it was like the angels coming over the mountain. I mean, it was emotional. We were crying.
So I'm thinking, I am screwed. I mean, we just finished that bull. You could see these storms coming on the horizon. Like I knew we dodged a bullet. It rained a little bit on us, and that storm went away, but you could see more coming. And so we're like, oh no, this is serious. And we're getting later in the day now, and we're still 7 miles from camp at this point, and a long way to go.
And shoots to get
country.
through, which he's no way he's walking through those. How is he going to do it? He can barely even stand.
And at some point, you probably are starting to put together that you got 4 hours daylight left. And
we knew our time was limited, and we still knew a bear's probably coming. So just to fast forward a little bit, so those guys came and helped us. We loaded up those bulls. We started walking out, and as I'm leading an elk, they offered to carry my pack, carry my gun. We couldn't get anything on that horse. He would not let us touch him. They didn't even close, so we had to lead him out too. But we started walking out, and this is when I started realizing how serious it was for me. I was setting a little bit more. We cross a little ravine to start climbing up the hill, and I pass out just from the pain. I start just getting lightheaded. I fall backwards. Somebody was right there. I don't know who it was. It was Kobe. He caught me and just picked me back up, and I just kept walking. I didn't even realize I passed out. I just kept going. But I'm dragging my leg. It's hurting really bad. I could tell you more about that injury. I was dealing with 3 torn quad muscles. They weren't completely severed, but there's tears all the way across like that midsection of my thigh. I have a big hematoma that's up above that on another section of one of those quads. And it was long as a brat at least, and just big around, and that just locked up that whole muscle. I was dealing with tears where my muscles all attach around my knee as well. And then I tore my knee up. I tore my meniscus, and just it damaged. It was a pretty good.
Should not be walking.
Shouldn't be walking on that, but I'm just stubborn enough. I'm going to try it and go. And these guys kept talking, Brian kept telling me,
we got to
no,
call.
off the table. We're not calling for help. And so we walked up out of that bull. We led all 5 of those horses out with those 2 bulls on it. We got up to the top, and luckily a rain that came earlier, it softened up that ground a little bit. When those other 3 horses came, they created a better trail than when Brian. I was able to just walk up over those chutes and around to that into the other basin. And at that point, I was in so much more pain. Like just putting all that pressure on my quads that were damaged anyway, climbing up the mountain, that was about all I could handle. And Brian, I think, caught back up to us at that point. They had to go get some of their gear that we'd left, and he caught up to us, and he could see me limping. I was losing mobility fast. I could maybe lift my leg an inch off the ground. My foot was maybe an inch off the ground is all I could do with that.
You can see how slow he's walking.
I couldn't keep up with these horses, and we needed to go. We still had several horses in camp that we didn't get back to. We'd planned on being back earlier, at least sending somebody back by 9 or 10 to check horses, but just everything went right. And we got these elk, and it just slowed us up. And so that was another part that was in the back of our minds. We got to get back to those horses. And so Bryant caught back up to me. He's like, hey, you got to ride. We got to go. We got to get going faster. And so he brought his mare over, and I was uphill up the side of that mare, and I put my right leg on the stirrup, and I went to swing my left leg over that was damaged. And just, oh man, a wave of pain came over me. As soon as I hit that saddle, I just passed out and fell off the back and landed right on the mountain. And that was another level. I was like, oh gosh, I can't ride. 30 miles back in, I can't walk. I can't even ride a horse. And I'm still stubborn. I'm not going to let this stop me. I just hit the ground. I rolled over. Oh, Bryant, keep going. Why don't you go help those guys get that meat taken care of? I'll catch up. And so I kept walking out.
I didn't just leave. I'm like, no, I'm not leaving you up
I
here.
kept pushing him. I mean, we had another guy with us. Drew was with us. He was leading my horse. He was keeping an eye out for me. But still, you have 3 bulls, all that meat to take care of. It's a lot of work. These guys, they kept going. They got ahead of me, and I couldn't keep up if I wanted to. If they were walking, I couldn't keep up. But we kept going out. We made it into that bull, about where we saw that grizzly the night before. And that's where we had to wing the meat. And so our plan was down, let's not take the meat all the way down the canyon. We're tagged out. Let's just hang it up here on top. We'll go down and get camp set up. Well, first thing tomorrow, we'll come back and get the meat. And so in my mind, I'm still thinking, oh, I can sleep this off. Tomorrow I'll be fine. It's just a little bruise. I'll be fine.
And I'm still like, you're nuts. We're calling for help.
Once you come to that point of this is the action that we're putting forth, you've had experience where you've had to use the Garmin Mini?
I have never for an emergency.
Service?
This would be the first. Didn't really know what to expect. So to just extend the story just a teeny bit before we decide to call, he's too stubborn to let me call at that point. It would have been a great spot because the helicopter could come in right there on the top. We have to drop into this canyon. But this big storm's coming in, and he says, no, I'm fine. I'm like, Todd, I got to do this. I got to call. And he said, nope. So we gave him a bunch of rain gear. He walks. We take off to get the horse because we have a camp full of horses we got to get back to, and they've been tied up all day. So I take off with horses, and he goes with one of our buddies, Colby, and walks out. And they walk down this canyon in this muddy, ugly terrain.
So the rain hit us when we were coming out.
Bad.
And we had to drop 2,000 feet in vertical elevation to get back to camp. And that's when that's when the pain got even worse. Like walking uphill was one thing, but going downhill with this injury was so much worse. Even with trekking poles, it was horrible. So just going off that first stretch of the mountain after we hung up the meat, I think I passed out another 12 times. Where I'd be fighting the pain. I'd be going through just surges of pain and shock, and I'd just start hyperventilating and just pass out and fall over. These guys, like I said, they tried talking me into calling several times, like, no, I got this. And for me, and I think a lot of hunters feel this way, is you don't want someone to do work for you. Like packing in on a trip like that takes a lot of work. Packing horses with me in camp that far in, it is a lot of work. And I don't want to just leave that to those guys. So here's my bull, here's my 2 horses, here's my camp, good luck, you're on your own. I couldn't accept that in my mind. So I walked all the way out that night, and Kobe and I didn't get back to camp till almost 10:30. So I got injured around 2 o'clock. We'd gone through a really bad rainstorm. It rained for several hours, and luckily we had a little extra rain gear. But again, I was not in great condition. I was in a lot of pain. I was going through everything you can imagine with an injury. And then you compound it with getting wet and being exhausted. I'm becoming dehydrated. I don't even realize that I'm not worried about eating, but I'm getting dehydrated as well. And now I'm dealing with hypothermia. And at one point we had to cross the river, and I kept slipping all over and falling. Every time I'd hit my leg, it'd make me pass out. But it happened in the middle of the river when we were crossing. And Kobe was right there. I mean, I started like passing out, and he was right there. He grabbed me and just wrapped his arms around me and held me upright while I was just going in and out of consciousness. And we had to stand in that river up to our knees. And that's when it really got me, Josh. I remember coming out of that river, and my body just started shutting down. I just told Kobe, I was like, I got to just rest, dude. I've got to just sleep for just a minute. Let me sleep for a minute. Yeah. And looking back, my body was done. I was shutting down. If I had been alone on that bank of that river, if I'd have laid down and fallen asleep, it was starting to snow a little bit that night. I know I would have died right on the bank of that river. That's how advanced this had become and how serious it was. Kobe was really, his head was in the game. He grabbed me, picked me up, said, you're not stopping. We got a half mile to go. You've got to keep going. And that's the beauty of hunting with good friends and people that are going to watch out for you, that are capable. But they got us back to camp. I was in rough shape. These guys got back earlier. The horses were fine. Miraculously, everything was taken care of. And they'd set up a fire in the tent. They got a little food. But I was in such bad shape when I got to the tent, I couldn't unzip my coat. I couldn't feel anything on my fingers. I couldn't move anything. I tried bending over to untie my boot. I couldn't reach my boot. My leg had swollen up so much. When I'm trying to bend over, it felt like someone was just stabbing a knife right through my quads. These guys had to undress me. It was a pretty humbling thing from all the pride that I'm experiencing to now having to have my friends take my clothes off. They tried to sit me down. As soon as I sit down, hit the back of that chair, if a knife was coming up through the back of my leg. And so I had to stand. The most comfortable position was standing for me, believe it or not. But they had to completely undress me. I stood in front of the fire naked for 15 minutes before I could even feel the warmth of the fire. And so even then, I'm still being stubborn. I don't need help. We'll be fine tomorrow. Give me some good
I'll be
food.
fine. I'll ride a
Give me
horse.
some
Rub a
water.
little dirt on it.
Well, rub some dirt, and that's all right. But yeah, so it wasn't until the next morning. We made it through the night. Bryant set his alarm. He checked on me every hour. He stoked the fire. He's making sure I was breathing. He was really concerned. All these guys were. But the next morning, we had to make that decision. What are we going to do? The forecast, we're getting information. Another big storm was coming. It was supposed to dump 8 to 10 inches of snow on us that night. And so we still have a big mountain to climb and 30 miles to go. And it was dangerous without all the meat. Now we have 3 bulls
An
to
injured
pack
person.
up. And an injured person.
And I said, this is serious. Because he wouldn't listen to us. And Colby and I both have Garmin's, and I said, we have got to call. And he goes, let's wait till morning, see how he does. So I stayed up pretty much all night, watching him breathe, watching him just make sure he was fine. I was ready to go if I had to do anything to keep him alive. And like you said, I think that's the one thing that when you hunt with people you trust that will make sure you come out, it just means something. You don't want to go with anyone else. And that next morning, he still was stubborn. He's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, we've got to get help.
Oh, I'm thinking of ways like I could limp out. If I went at this rate coming off the mountain, it'll only take me 3 days to walk out of here. I could do that.
And I'm like,
I'm still fighting it.
So I went to Colby and I said, he's out of the equation now. We're not letting him make the decision. And I said, I'm calling. So I got my Garmin. I walked out in the field and he didn't know. I don't.
No, we
did. We tell him when I was going
They had
to
to have
do
a
it,
little
but-
come to Jesus meeting with me and sit down saying, okay, why don't you want to go? And I went through all the reasons. And they finally just looked at me right in the eye. And this is what a good friend would do, tell you the things you don't want to hear. But they told him, like, look, dude, you're a bigger liability to the team if you stay here.
that was the big-
And that hurt. That really hit me to my core. If we get this whole pack train loaded up with camp and we're headed up, and if I'm trying to ride a horse and I pass out and fall off on a steep part of the mountain, it can cause a huge wreck. I mean, once you get that many horses loaded up, you really need to keep moving. You don't want to stop. You don't want to have delays. That's when bad things happen. And so they were right. And so Bryant said, yeah, we got to do this. And I agree. He's like, yep, we got to. Please do it.
So I've never done this before. I just hit the SOS and not knowing what to expect. And within probably 10 minutes, I got a call from Jackson. Not a call, a text from Jackson Emergency Services saying, hey, what's going on? Or emergency, give us an update. And I told them we have an severely injured friend, Hunter, kicked by a horse, need help immediately. He said, give us a second. We're going to round up some ideas. And then let's go.
And what time was this, Brian?
This is probably at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
8, 9
And
o'clock.
we're making a plan to get out. We got to get out today.
Yeah.
Big storm coming in. We need to get him. So we start to get camp going. There's a lot to clean up. Our meet's up on top of the mountain. We did take one bull down because we didn't have time to load it. So we had one bull still up in the trees down at camp, 2 of them up at the top, and 30 miles to go. All of us are a little worried, like, how are we going to do this? We can't take him. So I call SOS. And one thing that was interesting, he said, don't tell my wife, don't tell our wives. We can't let them know. One thing you need to know with Garmin is you have an emergency contact. And that when you SOS, that contact is contacted right away. So my wife gets a call from Jackson saying, hey, your husband has sent a SOS. You can imagine what's going through her head. And she already has been through a massive accident with me and a horse. And she has no information other than someone has SOS'd, your husband did, and there's an injury of a severely injured person. Panic home. So she calls all the wives. Everybody now knows. We don't think they know. And I get a text from her, a very capital, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, great. So I run over, guys, our wives know this is not good. And
It was good. We should have told them earlier.
no, but
really.
we weren't ready to tell them. We wanted to not give them a worry because now they don't know what's, he says we cannot get a small helicopter in here.
Those storms that were coming,
huge.
they hit both Jackson
Wind
and
and
Cody.
everything.
And they shut down all small aircraft. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, we're not that far as a crow flies to Jackson or Cody. Well, they'd be able to get a helicopter in fast. Well,
Not
because
with
of
the
my
storm.
pride. Now the storm is there. They shut that all down. There wasn't an option now.
And he
And
basically
so-
said, I don't know if we're going to get one into you today. He goes, we're going to do our best within the hours, but we got to figure out another plan. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
They said, okay, we've reached out as far as Idaho Falls, Billings, Montana. There's no one around. There's nothing that can come get you.
Because of the storm.
And so for me, I'm just sinking lower and lower. It just hits me. I was like, oh no. And now I'm worried, what if I have something more serious going on? Maybe I've got a clot or something that's working its way up. This just went from stupid to worse.
And this is where I think brains need to overcome stubbornness. I should have called the day it happened. I should have said, because we had good weather, good enough weather. And I kept beating myself up like I should have done this. I should have called. We could have gotten help that day. We were on top of the mountain. We could have gotten a helicopter there. And not against Todd. I would have done the same thing. I would have probably, no, I can do this. I can do this.
Sure.
But we're in this predicament now. And he says we need to extend our call out to Cheyenne, to
think it was a
National Guard.
This is Jackson EMS.
This is Jackson.
telling us.
It was
So-
Cody, wasn't it? Wasn't
Cody or Jackson.
Yeah.
No, Jackson reached out to Cody, then reached
So
out to
we were with their.
But they were in all full communication, emergency services, and they're trying to even think about a horse train to come in to get us. They were doing anything, but they contacted over in Cheyenne for a Blackhawk. And I'm like, Todd, you got a big helicopter coming in to get you. And they said, they're fueling up in Cheyenne. They're getting ready to leave. I'm like,
They said
how
they'd be
long is this
4
going to
hours.
take? It's midday. We're thinking, man, we have got to get on the trail. We got to get to the top, which was 12,000 feet maybe, to the very top to get us over to the back edge. And we're like, if we get up there and the storm hits, we're in trouble. It's going to get bad up at that elevation. So we got to get on the trail. And I'm just, when are you guys coming? And I think they stopped in Riverton to fuel up. Big helicopter coming. What's amazing about the Garmin is it locates you right where you're at. We're in this small little open yard.
It's a decent opening, yeah.
But it's still in the middle of these canyon, down the lower canyon. And yeah, it was amazing. I don't know if you want to tell that whole story with the helicopter coming in, but
Before you do that, Todd, let me ask a couple of questions, Brian. On the Garmin, the total communications that you had with Jackson, how many different exchanges was
15, 20.
15, 20?
Yeah.
Okay. At any point, were you worried about battery power or anything else with your Garmin, with your phone power being Bluetooth to it? You had everything still working.
Yeah, one thing about, and as Todd mentioned, I am extremely prepared. I bring battery packs. I had a little
solar charger.
solar
that you
charger.
had.
I mean,
That's where I was
were
going
fully
with that.
loaded. It was,
All right.
it had plenty of energy.
Because you hate to get to that
Yeah,
point where you're
I-
starting to make these arrangements and
Yeah,
then all
you
of a
have no
sudden you're
power.
like, oh man, now
I make sure
I'm running
we're
out of power.
Yeah, I'm always checking. I have portable little chargers. I make sure everything was plugged in. I was like, we cannot lose power. I think I had 50, 60% at the time.
Okay.
Your wives are texting. So I'm constantly answering text messages through the Garmin. And I was so grateful to have that. It was our life-saving kind of our connection to the world because we were very remote. I've never, and to go back to when those elk, we're tough people. We act tough. We're hunters. I have never been that nervous, that scared, that emotional killing an elk in that
Just
kind
the
of country.
vulnerabilities of
Vulnerability,
everything.
just so remote. A lot of guys that say when they work in the mines, it's that pure darkness. That it was like that at nighttime. We had no moon, and it was beautiful. Never seen anything like it, but it was pure dark and very remote. It was our one connection we had. I would never go in the mountains.
At any
without
point,
it.
did National Guard start having communications directly with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they did. They
All
were
right.
now in connection with me, saying, "Hey, we're in Riverton, fueling up, and we will be there in a couple hours." And then they did connect with us about an hour before, maybe 30 minutes before, and said, "Move all your horses out of the field. We're coming in." And we're like, "Oh boy." He says, "We will have a 90 mile per hour plus downwind coming off those pillars, and you need to secure everything." And we have no idea what that means other than, okay, get the horses in the trees, tie them up, get the camp secure, hold the tent. We still had the tent up, and you could hear it coming through the canyon. It just, the whole canyon lit up, just that sound of a helicopter. And I took a video of it, and it was pretty phenomenal to watch that thing come over the tree line. Huge helicopter.
Todd, you're at this point, you're now more than 24 hours removed from the incident. Pain, shock.
Yeah, still
whole
experiencing all that. And now my pride's as wounded as can be. I was excited and relieved to see the helicopter. I was still a little embarrassed, a little ashamed. And to this point where I can't take care of myself and I have no option other than to get flown out.
Right.
So I was going through a lot emotionally as well, but what do? There's no other option.
So you're staged away from the landing area, chopper lands.
100 feet
Yeah,
from the
they
camp.
sent the crew of 4 pilots. I actually met one of them through Leadership Wyoming and flew with him 2 months before on
Oh,
a Black
really?
Hawk. And I couldn't believe it. When he actually came over to me, and I was nervous because of the storm. I'm thinking like, man, there's better be some good helicopter pilots. It's getting windy and rainy at this point. And it was just no little tender mercy where he walks up to me, he's like, "Hey, you got this hurt?" He pulls out his helmet. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've met you before. Whew, I'm going to fly with somebody that I trust." Like, what are the odds of that? Hey, let me take a little bit of gear. We loaded up and away we went. Saying goodbye to these guys, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Knowing what they're up against, knowing the work, knowing the distance, knowing the storm, and just knowing that they're there they got my back. That was still so hard, but I was so grateful for those friends and be willing to do that. And so, yeah, we take off in the helicopter, and they were told to take us up to Cody. That was the nearest emergency services they get me to. And so we start headed up that direction. And I mean, at one point, this wind shear hit us when we were trying to go over this pass, and it was just shaking the scene. It was, these pilots they were cool, they were calm, they were collected, they were great professionals. But in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm going to die in a helicopter as we're trying to get out of here. So it's shaking, and there's lightning and thunder and rain pound on our windshields. And at one point, we had to turn around. And I can't.
They can't get to Cody.
Well, they can't get to Cody. And so I'm looking at them. I can't hear them. They have their headsets on. I can't hear anything. And so I finally had to tap them on the shoulder and yell. I was like, "Where are we going?" I'm looking at my compass, and it's telling me we're going southeast instead of north. Like,
Idaho
we're not
Falls?
going to, no, we were headed back to Riverton. So they got looked and doing some calculations. They said, "Hey, we at this rate fighting the storm, we're going to run out of fuel before we get to Cody." And so they redirected us to Riverton. The new plan was that we go back and fill up in Riverton and then take me to Cody. And in or out, we had to cross another range and it was bad. And it was beautiful. I'll say that. That area is beautiful on the back of a horse and on top of the mountain. When you get up in a helicopter, oh my gosh, it's like looking down at paradise. And I could see elk everywhere, Josh. Like I need one of these for scouting. This is great. Not that you'd ever do that, but you could see so much up there and it was just breathtaking. Even with all the pain and trauma, everything we're dealing with, I was wow, this is beautiful. God's earth is beautiful. They took me back toward Riverton, and I finally talked to them. I was like, hey, my wife's coming from Bridger Valley. You guys are coming from Cheyenne, the two southern corners of the state. Let's not go up to the northwest corner of the state. And so we got approval to stop there, and they made me swear, make an oath that I'd actually get to the hospital and take care of in Riverton. But yeah, so that's what we did. They dropped me off in Riverton. My wife was on her way, and she was actually just outside of Lander coming up to Riverton to meet me. And so she was able to get me up at the airport and then drive me to the... That's how stubborn I am, Josh. I wouldn't let them help me get off the helicopter until I couldn't do it. I was surrounded by paramedics, guys who were awesome, willing to help out. And they had to wrangle me in and get me looked over in the ambulance. But we got to the hospital and started getting taken care of. But my condition was so bad, they really couldn't treat me there. I needed to see a surgeon. I think the injury happened on a Thursday. That was Friday morning. And I didn't get to see a doctor until the next Tuesday. In the meantime, these guys are still trying to get off the mountain. And that's the only thing I could think of at that point. Is like I was feeling so much just guilt of knowing that I put them in a worse situation by not calling for help sooner. They would have been able to get out before that storm came. I should have called sooner. I should ask for help sooner. And I think that's something for men that we could all stop and think about. It doesn't matter if it's a mental health issue. It doesn't matter if it's a physical issue that we're dealing with. We sometimes wait too long to ask for help when we should ask so much sooner and just swallow our pride and say, I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
And let your friends, let your loved ones, let your neighbors help. I don't need to be so stubborn.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get ourselves in worse situations because of our pride. And in this case, I put them in a worse situation because of my pride.
What kind of priority would you put for the Garmin Mini InReach?
If you're going to be anywhere in the backcountry, you got to have it. It's an essential part. You have to have something like that.
I learned that. So back to when I got kicked by a horse in the face, I didn't have one. And I had to walk off 2 miles with a blown open head. It was bad. I should have died up there. The doctor's like, you were one of 10 that survived. And I didn't have any help. I had to be driven all the way to, I think it was Kemmer. And it was a 5-hour dilemma of just getting there. And I had no help. We had no phone service. And so I made a decision at that moment, that was 2016, that I would never go in the mountains without a Garmin. My wife made me vow that I would, and I did. And no matter what, wherever we hunt, I have it. And I'm like, this is...
And you use it.
I use it all the time.
Familiarity with the equipment is essential.
You don't want to get one of these and not know how to use it. It's pretty simple to use once you figure it out. I communicate with his wife to say, hey, we're at camp, so she knows. I let my wife know that we're there. And, hey, we got an elk down, just letting you know, hey, we'll be back tonight, whatever. I just let them know. Let your loved ones know, because there's something about when they know that we're okay also. Especially my wife, who knows that I'm accident prone. She's like, you better be checking in all the time. And go back to another time, we were hunting. I lost my Garmin. I had no way to communicate with her. And I was like, she's going to kill me. So I drove all the way into where we were at. I'm not going to tell you where, but I drove into a city. It took a couple hours just to text her and hey, we're good. Just wanted to make sure I'm good. So Garmin is amazing. It's something I would never go without. Any hunter that is in the backcountry, get rid of your pride. It is something you need. It's going to save your life one day.
Or somebody else's.
Another point with that is in Wyoming, we have some rugged area. It's remote. We don't have a lot of people here across the state. And there's a lot of places you go that it doesn't seem like it's that far away from home. It doesn't seem like if you think, if something happened, I'd be able to get out of here. But there's a lot of places you get into, even out here in the desert, where you don't have cell service. And you might not be that far away from a road, but if you get in a situation like that where you're injured, you can't get out, you can't tell anybody, that becomes a life and death situation.
And then you add the layers of weather,
and
dehydration,
so absolutely.
Hypothermia.
And so it's not just an essential tool for like wilderness areas 30 miles back in. It's essential to anywhere you don't have cell service.
That's right.
So when we left, we got caught in a blizzard at the top of the mountain, had to unload all of our gear, throw the horses in this little small spot of trees right where that grizzly bear had walked through. And so we have 3 dead elk. One we just took and laid on the ground. We were in such a dire need of, there was 4 of us with a ton of horses, and we're in the middle of this blizzard, and just there was a lot of miracles that happened on the mountain that day. But we did get home. We rode the next morning very early, all 30 miles out. It was exhausting. Wet, rained, and snowed the entire way. And there was a higher power that got us out of there. Thankful for prayer, thankful for good friends. But that Garmin saved our lives. It was really what got us out of there. I look back and I think, what would have happened had I not had one of those? I would have had to leave him on the mountain on my horse to go find them wherever they were until radios worked, try to wrangle people. And then somehow one of us would have had to leave 30 miles out to get help. and leave him there. And you just don't.
And then help back in. You add that time.
You're talking days.
Yeah.
I talked to a surgeon.
Right.
I talked to a surgeon. I don't know if he did about this. When you have a severe injury like that and you have internal bleeding potentially, the amount of potential for clots and to die is so heightened. And he says, you're very lucky he did not bleed internally more and died. And so that really hits you to think of how important to get rid of your pride of the hunt, because the hunt is amazing. You take care of all these things that kill this animal, but sometimes you forget about, how am I going to take care of me if I get hurt?
No animal's worth your life. No, I'll tell you that. Doesn't matter how big a bull, big a buck. Yeah, it's not worth your life.
We learned the hard way a little bit. I didn't have anything. I just chased the dream, chase that elk and get as remote as you can and away from as many people as you can. And after my first injury, that changed my mind. I will never go without it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. It's a great story. It's something that you both will carry. It's probably strengthened what was already a strong bond of friendship, a brotherhood. Todd, you eventually at some point, you got your rack. Now when you look at it and you're just flushed with all the memories of everything that went down on the leg now, you're coming up on the anniversary. You'll be in the field again this fall.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a long journey. At one point, my leg was so damaged when I got home that I had nerve damage as well. My muscles seized up. They couldn't even move. I was essentially paralyzed for almost 4 weeks. To be at that point where you're just so low, I couldn't even get dressed by myself for several weeks. I couldn't stand up and get on the couch, just sitting down. I had to have help sitting down. That's where I was at. But to fast forward and go through, I had to get knee surgery at one point. They didn't decide not to do surgery on my muscles. They thought it'd be best to let them heal appropriately. I had to be off of them for 8 weeks. And they did. And it took, I had a lot of atrophy and it's taken a long time to rebuild that strength. And yeah, to be where I'm at today, it really is a miracle to be ready to go hunting. I haven't been on a horse again, but I will. I totally will. And I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this season.
You guys are planning the same trip this year?
Not that same trip.
We're going to take a break from that for a moment.
We've got another place we're going to go where we've had a lot of success and good memories.
Someone asked me, would I go back and do that again? I told them absolutely. To experience what we saw, we want to have a few better horses. One takeaway also is make sure you know your horse as well. We thought we did. He was
but it's hard when you're
you never
renting
know.
a horse,
You
right?
And when you have horses,
know.
you've had them for years.
You just don't know what they're going to do.
Horses, they go through things just like we do, and they might have something startle and they have a bad day. Yeah, I've seen the best of horses just snap and act on something that surprises them or shocks them, and they do something that's uncharacteristic of them. I mean, that happens. So a horse could be your greatest asset or your biggest liability in a situation like that, even the best of horses.
And he was an amazing horse.
He was.
There was no reason for him to do what he did, but it just happened. And so you got to be ready for everything. You just be prepared for the worst, because from a moment of just pure joy of the hunt, that just everything was happening so beautifully. And then just that switched to survival mode.
Yeah, I'd say, Josh, it's so important to be prepared just for the little things. You never know. And I didn't
Boy
remember
Scouts
the name
have
of
it
that.
right.
You know, you're right. And I will just say that tool I was talking about with my trekking poles, that's called Trek Balls.
Okay.
Jeff Orvin, he lives in Kemmer area. He designs those, and I always take that with me. It was great to have that as a shooting stick, but also I use those as crutches to get off that mountain, those trekking poles. And I'm glad I had those. But you just never know when things can go wrong. You got to be ready to go.
And another thing I would always have in your pack is rain gear. I think that's one big thing. He didn't have a really great jacket, and
Well, I did, but they were on my saddlebags.
yeah, on the saddlebags,
And we couldn't
get them off.
Nope.
Yeah.
Couldn't
And I
get
had
them.
an extra pair that I was able to give him to walk out the rest of that. So just little things like that. Just don't be prepared, layered up. Make sure you have the right gear. Really check your packs. Make sure you have what you need. You think I can handle anything.
It'll never happen to me.
Yeah.
Never happened to
And
me.
I think that's the beauty of this is you can convey a story where the worst happened. And you can think about all of those things. Was there anything that you wished you would have had that you didn't have? Or did you have it? It sounds like you were very prepared, which is great. And this could have had a much different ending if you hadn't have been. If you think about just, as you mentioned, with the Garmin InReach.
It's a great question. I would say that if anything, that everyone in your party, if I could say anything, if everyone in your party had one. So if I had to leave him, I could have communicated with him because he would have been by himself, and I'm the only one
Do you
that had
now
one.
have one?
I had one before. I just didn't take it with me on the trip. I was like, you guys have 3. And in a situation like that, you're cutting weight.
Right.
You only have so much space
that's-
to take on a horse, and so you have to make decisions.
Yeah.
And so, I decided to leave mine home. I'm not going to worry about it.
I
had
don't know
an
about
older
you
model.
guys, but before I go on a trip like that, I have everything laid out.
Laid out.
And when it gets down to it, 20% of it I had out. I don't need that.
You have to make those
I
decisions
don't
on what
need
to cut.
that. Yeah.
That's an essential thing. It's got to be in your bag that goes with you.
There's certain essential items that just have to be there, and that one's got to be there. Huh?
I say I think that's a false. That's a false narrative in your brain. You should never have that kind of attitude, because this is the one thing that saved our lives. Saved his life. And if any piece that I would go back and say is the number one thing you pack, it's the Garmin. Garmin and rain gear.
And rain gear. Yeah. You got to stay dry. You got to be able to withstand
Friends
the
that you
elements.
can trust.
Yeah.
I used to hunt alone a lot over the years in the Wyoming range. I hunt elk and mule deer way back in. And I spend time with a lot of good friends. There's days where I still just go alone. And for me, that's one thing I don't know if I could ever do again. If you have an inReach, you're not really alone, but still things can happen where you may not be able to use that, or you may not be able to just have your right wits about you and not think to use it.
Yeah.
And so hunting with somebody you know and trust is really an important thing to do.
Gents, I'm so glad we were able to take this time, especially as we're getting close to the eve of the season. Somebody's going to hear this and is going to make the decision to prepare themselves with that tool. And that's the hope here is we have that personal responsibility to go to the field, not just for ourselves, but for those at home that aren't with us. And be prepared.
Don't let money be the thing that keeps you from doing that. It's not worth it. It's worth every penny.
I know there are varying levels of subscription with the Garmin inReach that limit how much you can use it. Of course, once you get to an emergency situation, that's all out the window. Any particulars about your subscription? Anything you would recommend for someone who is, now that I've heard this, I think I'm going to do that?
Yeah, I think I pay $65 a month, $69 a month, whatever it is, for unlimited texting. And with how much I communicate with my family at home, I didn't want to be limited and have to pay extra. You can shut it off when you're done hunting. You just shut the machine down for the rest of the year and just turn it on when you need it. And that's the beauty of this is a subscription. You pay all year round. You can choose, and it's worth $65. I think unlimited texting I have, and so I can always be in contact to let the loved one know that you're safe, you're home, whatever.
And it doesn't require your wife to have one. I mean, it goes directly to her
to her cell phone.
This is an essential tool. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I use onX on my phone to map everything. And then with the app that's with the Garmin, it's really easy to just communicate. Bluetooth's right to it, so you can easily, just like you're texting. Those that just have the Garmin, it's really hard to text on that device to really get words out. And so it's an easy Bluetooth. I leave it right on my binocular case attached to it securely. And so it works really well.
Yeah. You have the Mini, right? The inReach Mini.
Yeah.
Is that what you have too, Tom?
Yep, that's what I've got now. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I upgraded for sure after this experience.
And it's nice. Like I said, I'm grateful he did. All those years that we've hunted, he's never had one. We just always hunt together.
I tease Brian all the time. Like, get off your phone, man. We're hunting. Put that down. That's how I got roll. So,
And just letting my wife know, hey, we're good we're on the mountain. I told her I'd always let her know we were safe wherever we were at. And so it's just something I always do now. And I think she knows just how accident prone I am, that she's like, you better check in every hour. So
it gives your loved ones an extra peace of mind, a really extra level of peace of mind.
Yeah, I can imagine the panic when there was an emergency sent from your Garmin.
I asked her that. I said, how was the panic? She goes, I was already used to this once, so I was ready to whatever it took kind of attitude. And I'm like, this is not good. I need to step up my game.
She's been
conditioned to me.
Hey, thank you both very much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I guarantee you that it will have some meaning and some outreach that will be difference making for somebody else down the road. That's really what I hope to accomplish with this and being able to share this. I know it's a wave of emotions. I could see it on your face, Todd, when you were talking about it. I know as men, we have pride, we have ego, and I know exactly when you're referring to the situation of just being able to say, I got this, just let me sleep this off. Just, you don't want to be that burden, but sometimes we got to do that checkup from the neck up and say, you know what, this is why I have friends. This is why I'm back here with you. I'm sharing these experiences because this is our partnership. This is what we're doing together, and that's a tough spot, man. But I'm glad it ended the way it did. I'm glad everybody is healthy, and I'm glad you've been able to recover and the mobility has come back, the strength. I'm sure that took some time, but I wish you both the best of your adventures in the field together and many more memories to come.
Hopefully that's our goal.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
Keep going.
All right. Wild things in wild places. Till next time, happy trails.
And that wraps up another episode of Wild Things and Wild Places. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. Make sure you never miss out by subscribing. Whether you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, streaming us on our website, or following us on social media, subscribing is the best way to stay connected. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more wild episodes.
Everybody knows I'm a muley fanatic.